One moment, my life was picture perfect, then a single revelation tore it all apart. What happened next is a journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and an unexpected shot at redemption you won't believe. Growing up in a small Midwest town, life followed a familiar, comforting rhythm. For me, baseball was more than a sport, it was my sanctuary. The crisp sound of a bat hitting a ball, the playful banter of teammates, and my dad's constant support made the game feel like home. He celebrated every hit and consoled me after every strikeout, teaching me resilience and determination through his unwavering belief in me. As I grew older, my passion for baseball intertwined with my academic ambitions. By the time I reached college, I was juggling the demands of a challenging engineering program with the intensity of collegiate sports. I thrived on the dual challenge, embracing both intellectual growth and the camaraderie of the field. But as much as I loved the game, a quiet truth began to emerge: talent alone wouldn't be enough. Success required adaptability, and I knew I needed to prepare for a future beyond baseball. When my dream of playing professionally started to fade, I channeled my energy into engineering. The same determination that drove me on the field now fueled my pursuit of a new goal. I discovered that building a career demanded just as much grit and perseverance as chasing home runs. Over time, my efforts paid off, and I found a path I truly loved: teaching and mentoring students while tackling complex challenges alongside brilliant colleagues. My life felt full of purpose and connection, a balance I deeply appreciated. Curveballs, both in sports and in life, had always been tough for me. During my college years, I became known as a batter who could crush fastballs, but that singular strength also limited my prospects in the professional world. Recognizing the long-term value of my education, I focused on academics and built a future beyond the field. Fast forward 25 years from graduation and 15 years into my career, I was living what felt like a dream. I was thriving as a full-time professor at a respected engineering school in Texas, consulting on government projects and managing an innovative manufacturing lab. My personal life seemed just as solid. My wife, Rachel, and I had settled into a home that felt like everything we'd ever wanted, and our daughter, Emma, a civil engineering junior, was attending the same university where I taught. Life felt like it was perfectly aligned, as though I was finally hitting life's home runs. But life has a way of pitching the unexpected, and the curveball I faced would change everything. One afternoon, my phone buzzed, and Emma's voice, tense with urgency, came through the line. "Dad, what's going on?" I stopped by the house and saw movers. "Mom said she's moving out and that you two are having problems. Why didn't you tell me?" Her words hit me like a blow. I froze, struggling to find a response. "Are you sure this isn't some kind of joke?" I finally asked, my voice unsteady. "No, Dad," she said, her tone steady but filled with concern. In that instant, the foundation of my seemingly perfect life began to crumble. Standing there in disbelief, I watched the movers packing up our life. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. When I came home earlier, Rachel had refused to explain anything. Now, Emma was looking at me with concern and suspicion. "Did you do something, Dad?" she asked, her voice cutting through me like a knife. Her question stung. I wasn't a perfect husband, but I couldn't think of anything that would push Rachel to this point. "No, honey," I said, shaking my head, my voice quiet but firm. "I haven't done anything." I rushed inside, determined to get answers. Emma met me at the door, her face filled with worry. "She hasn't explained anything, Dad," she said, her voice wavering. "I'll support you, but, you didn't do something awful, right?" "No, Emma, I swear," I reassured her. "Let's just go talk to her." Always one for fairness, Emma decided to record the conversation on her phone so her sister, Mia, could hear the truth later. Together, we walked into the house, where Rachel stood directing the movers with cold efficiency. "Rachel, what's going on?" I asked, my voice strained with confusion and desperation. She turned to me with a firm, almost detached expression. I'm leaving, Dax, she said flatly. I don't want to argue about it. It won't change anything, and it'll just make me angry. Before I could respond, Emma's voice broke through, filled with indignation. Mom, unless you explain what's going on, you're only going to make me angrier. What are you doing? Rachel glanced at her, clearly uncomfortable. Emma, step outside with me. Let's talk there, she said, her tone attempting to be calm but faltering under the pressure. Emma pulled her hand away from her mother but followed reluctantly as Rachel led us onto the deck. She slid the door shut behind us and paused for a moment before finally speaking. I met someone, she said, her voice tight. He's new in town, from New Mexico. He works in real estate. I'm leaving to be with him. I've already filed for divorce, Dax. The words hit me like a truck. Well, that's a shock, I said bitterly, my voice filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. You couldn't just cheat, could you? Instead, it's some magical connection, and now you know he's the one. Emma snorted, her anger boiling over. Sure, Mom. That's how it works. How dumb do you think we are? Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but Emma didn't let her. You're in real estate, Mom. No one keeps tabs on your time. How many showings, or dinners, did you have with Romeo? Rachel shook her head, her voice trembling. It's not like that. Yes, it is, I interrupted, my voice rising with frustration. You don't just decide to blow up your life overnight. Rachel tried to recover, her voice softening. You'll come to love Charles once you get to know him, she said, almost pleading. Not happening, Emma shot back, her voice cold. I want nothing to do with a guy who goes after a married woman. I'm telling Mia everything, and don't think for a second this doesn't change everything. I've lost all respect for you. Don't even bother bringing him around me, I'll spit on him. Emma, Rachel started, her voice cracking. You don't know anything, Mom. Emma cut her off sharply, tears brimming in her eyes. I've never been so disappointed. You've ruined everything. God, I hate you. Rachel turned to me then, her face a mixture of helplessness and guilt. Dax, she began. I shook my head, my voice hard and unwavering. Don't look at me. The differences between Emma and Mia always amazed me, even though they looked almost identical. Emma was a ball of energy, always buzzing with excitement and filling the air with chatter. Mia, on the other hand, was quieter, more affectionate, but when she played softball, she transformed into a powerhouse on the field. Their contrasting personalities were a testament to how two kids raised the same way could be so different. When we arrived at their apartment, Mia lit up. Daddy, she squealed, sliding onto the couch and patting the spot next to her. What's up? She asked, wrapping her arms around me. Emma, ever the practical one, settled in on my other side. Dad, you need to talk to a lawyer, she said bluntly. Mia frowned, her face clouding with worry. Jesus, Emma. Listen to yourself. This is Mom we're talking about. Do you really think she's not capable of worse? Emma shot back. Considering what she's already done. It's surreal, Mia murmured, shaking her head. Like the Twilight Zone. It is, Emma agreed. But we have to deal with it. Mia's expression hardened with determination. I'm going to talk to her. Meet me for dinner later, she said, grabbing her bag and heading out the door. Emma leaned into me, and I wrapped my arm around her. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us both. Finally, I broke the quiet. How much do we have in the accounts? I asked. Emma glanced at me, then answered carefully, You've got $50 in checking and $1,000 in a money market account. I blinked, stunned. Is that just the minimum to avoid fees? Yeah, she replied hesitantly. There should be much more than that, I said, my voice tightening with disbelief. Mom must have drained it, Emma said quietly, her tone filled with bitterness. This isn't just cold, it's probably illegal. I'll move some funds around, I replied, trying to steady my thoughts. I've got money in a credit union she can't touch. That evening, we met Mia for dinner. She looked shaken, her eyes red-rimmed. I had to hear it from her myself, she said, wiping away tears. It's so unreal. Later, when we stopped by the house to pick up a few things, we found Rachel there. Her expression shifted when she saw us. Why are you here? She asked, her voice tight. We live here, Mia replied bluntly. Emma added firmly, we're not leaving Dad alone. They grabbed their bags without acknowledging her further and left the room. Rachel turned her gaze to me as she sat across the table. I don't want this to be harder than it has to be, she said. I still love you, but I need to be with Charles. We can still be friends, for the girl's sake. Friends? I repeated, the word feeling foreign and bitter. I don't have friends who treat me like this, or enemies, for that matter. Rachel sighed, her tone growing defensive. Why did you freeze the accounts? She asked. Friends? I don't want to be your friend, Rachel, I said coldly. After the divorce, I doubt we'll have a reason to talk. The girls will bring us together, she countered, graduations, weddings, their lives will go on. Maybe, I replied, my voice flat. But I'll handle what I need to. She leaned forward, her voice softening. I'm still the same person, Dax. You used to like me. I held her gaze, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. No, I didn't. Or if I did, I don't anymore. I never really knew you, I said, my voice steady but firm. I'm done. You can leave. Rachel stared at me for a moment, then sighed and walked away. The silence she left behind felt heavy, suffocating. Needing air, I grabbed my keys and drove to the river. Parking near the water, I stepped out and stood by the edge, letting the cool breeze and rippling currents clear my head. Time passed in a blur, but eventually, I returned home. Emma and Mia were waiting for me, their faces a mixture of worry and quiet strength. We'll figure this out, Dad, Emma said, hugging me tightly. Just keep being you, and we'll get through this. Mia nodded, her voice calm but resolute. Stay steady, Dad. You've always taught us to handle life's curveballs. After some tears and shared determination, they agreed to stick around to help me adjust. They checked in often, offering support as I navigated the chaos of the divorce. When it was finalized, they stayed with me for another week, their presence a comforting anchor. Neither of them mentioned Rachel, and I didn't ask. To cope, I poured myself into work. I took on extra projects, more classes, anything to keep busy. I missed being married, the comfort of a partner, the simple acts of care, but slowly, I began to heal. It took a year to feel steady again, and by the second year, I could finally say I was in a better place. Emma was finishing her PhD, and Mia had paused her studies to work. Life was moving forward. One day, memories of my old neighborhood in California crossed my mind, and I decided it was time for a change of scenery. I prepped my motor home, towing a Wrangler for local trips, and hit the road. Traveling turned out to be just what I needed. I stayed at campgrounds, attended events, and met new people. Most of them were couples, which occasionally made my solitude feel sharper, but the freedom of the road was exhilarating. 3 weeks later, after countless stops along the way, I reached my destination. I explored Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Ojai, soaking in the familiar beauty. One afternoon, while enjoying coffee in a cozy Ojai cafe, a lively commotion caught my attention. It was her, Sophia. Years ago, she had been a close friend, a bright presence during a difficult chapter in my life. Back then, she'd teased me about being single and tried her hand at matchmaking with her beautiful friends. Eventually, life pulled us in different directions, with Sophia moving to Los Angeles and me to Texas. But now, here she was, radiant as ever. Her elegance was striking. She wore a beige silk dress and low black heels that only emphasized her effortless confidence. "Dax," she said, her voice warm but playful. "Aren't you married? Where's your wife?" "I'm divorced," I admitted, surprised by how easily the words came. "It's a long story." Sophia waved it off with a smile. "I don't have time for that. You're taking me to dinner tonight. I have a fashion show in 20 minutes. Give me your number." Without hesitation, I handed it over, and she immediately texted me. "Wear a collared shirt," she teased as she rushed out, leaving me grinning for the first time in ages. Later, as I prepared for dinner, I remembered her love for turquoise jewelry. Stopping by a local shop, I picked out a handmade silver bracelet and anklet set adorned with turquoise stones. When I met her that evening, she beamed as she saw the jewelry. "You remembered," she said, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist. We laughed and reminisced, and as we headed toward the Jeep, her hand slipped into mine. "Are you sure you want to take the Jeep?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're looking a little too glamorous for it." Sophia laughed, her smile lighting up the night. "What, you think I'm too fancy for a Jeep? I'm still me, Dax." I chuckled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Maybe so," I said. "But judging by the way you're carrying yourself these days, you seem to be doing really well." She grinned, her confidence both familiar and exciting. For the first time in a long while, I felt like life had something new, and hopeful, to offer. "I've been working hard," Sophia said as we drove, her voice tinged with excitement. "Right now, I'm wrapping up a big real estate deal at Lake Cetas. The property here is insane." She spoke animatedly, sharing bits and pieces of her journey. At one point, her expression softened as she mentioned an ex-partner. "He was another real estate agent," she said. "We even talked about him moving in, but things didn't work out." Her tone grew serious, a shadow crossing her face. "That's the part one don't like to talk about." I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "You don't have to share if it's too hard." "No, I do," she insisted, her voice steady despite the vulnerability. "He was working with me on a big deal and cheated me. He bought land without doing his homework, and it backfired spectacularly. Right in the middle of the property was 200 acres owned by the city. It had been gifted with restrictions, no development allowed for 50 years. I raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" "It tanked," she said bluntly. "It was a mess. He blamed me, but I was the one who had to clean it up." Her frustration was evident, but before long, she shifted gears, her enthusiasm returning. "Anyway, I learned my lesson." Her ability to bounce back made me smile. "You haven't changed a bit," I teased. Sophia grinned mischievously. "Oh, I've changed," she replied. "I'm smarter now, and I keep finding hair in weird places," she added with a smirk. I burst out laughing, and soon the entire restaurant was glancing our way, curious about the source of the commotion. Spending time with Sophia felt effortless, filled with joy and light-heartedness. She was smart, funny, and full of life, a breath of fresh air. As I walked her to the door later that night, she chatted non-stop, making plans for our next outing. At the door, she hugged me tightly before heading inside. 2 days later, Sophia called me, her voice tentative. "Dax," she began, "why are you still here? Are you just spending time with an old friend, or is this something more?" I hesitated, her question catching me off guard. "It started as friendship," I admitted, "but what do you think it is?" "It's more than friends for me," she said softly. "I loved you back then, and I think I still do." Her words hit me like a jolt. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "You were my best friend," I replied, my voice quiet. "I was terrified it would ruin everything if you didn't feel the same." "I wanted you to," she whispered, her tone heavy with emotion. I tried so hard to get your attention. But I was too scared to say anything. I thought you didn't see me that way. I shook my head, my chest tightening. Sophia, I didn't know. I was afraid too. She reached out, placing her hand on mine. I don't want to hide this. Not for a week, not at all. I want to meet your girls. They look like the kind of people I'd love. I want you to meet them too, I said earnestly. I've been thinking about how to introduce you. Maybe a Zoom call first so everyone can get to know each other. Perfect, she said, her smile lighting up her face. When? How about Monday night? I suggested. I'm free, she said with a grin. Let's do it. I managed to get Emma and Mia on a Zoom call, though they were clearly skeptical about my intentions. After some casual chatting to break the ice, I watched as the initial wariness began to fade. Sophia's charm shone through, her warmth bridging the distance between us all. For the first time in a long while, I felt like something truly good was on the horizon. I finally worked up the courage to speak. I know I'm biased, but they're pretty amazing, aren't they? Sophia smiled warmly. They are. Smart, funny, and definitely your daughters. When Mia arrived, I picked her up at the airport. Seeing her took my breath away. My little girl had grown into a confident, beautiful young woman. She hugged me tightly, her energy contagious, as she chatted non-stop while we made a pit stop at In-N-Out for burgers. By the time we got to the van, she was still brimming with excitement, eager to see how it had been converted into a home on wheels. Her enthusiasm made the entire effort feel worth it. Later that day, I told her we'd be going to Sophia's for dinner. Mia lit up at the idea, quickly showering and getting ready. Dinner's going to be spicy, I warned. Do you like spicy food? Hell yes. Mia exclaimed. You can call me Tally, if you want, Sophia chimed in. Emma and your dad do. Thanks, but I like Jacinta, Mia replied with a grin. I can switch if you want. Sophia laughed. I'm fine with Jacinta. Now, let's talk spice. She leaned over to kiss me quickly before leading Mia to the kitchen. Opening the oven, Sophia released a mouth-watering aroma. These are lamb ribs, loaded with spices, she explained. We'll shred the meat for tortillas and pair it with pico de gallo, brown rice, and refried beans. Sounds amazing, Mia said, her eyes lighting up. As we sat down to dinner, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Mia and Sophia bantered like old friends. Are you two the same age? Sophia teased. Yeah, but she's the paranoid one, Mia joked, pointing at me. Not true, I protested, laughing. But I know you've been scheming against me since forever. All for your benefit, Mia quipped with a grin. After dinner, plans were finalized for another outing that suspiciously didn't include me, and we played a few board games before heading back to the van. On the way, Mia kept glancing at me, her expression unreadable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. What is it? I asked. She hesitated for a moment before her face softened into a small smile. I like her, Daddy, she said quietly. You're lucky. I know, right? I replied, chuckling. Don't let her get away, she added with a firm nod. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Emma flew in, and her reaction to Sophia was just as positive as Mia's. It felt like everything was falling into place. I stayed in California a little longer until consulting work called me back. After talking with Sophia, Emma, and Mia, we decided to turn it into a working vacation. Sophia and I flew ahead, and the girls joined us the next evening. During the day, I worked while they explored, and our evenings were spent together in what felt like paradise. By the end of the trip, I was surrounded by 3 sun-kissed women, 2 daughters who adored Sophia and the woman who had rekindled a spark in my life. One evening, while we were enjoying a quiet dinner, the girls asked Sophia about her past. Why haven't we heard of or met you before? Mia asked curiously. Sophia explained gently, your dad and I lost touch for a long time. We only reconnected this year. Emma leaned forward, cutting in before the conversation could veer into awkward territory. We'd love to chat more, but we have plans tonight, she said firmly, steering the conversation away. Rachel's reaction to Emma's dismissal was sharp, her frustration visible. She snorted unhappily, but Emma stood her ground, guiding her out with a determined look that brooked no argument. Once Rachel was gone, Mia turned to Sophia with an apologetic smile. Sorry about that, she said softly. It's a lot for her to take in. Sophia waved it off with her usual grace. It's okay, she said. I get it. But we've got something good here, and that's what matters. She squeezed my hand under the table, and in that moment, I felt certain, this was the life I'd been waiting for. I'm so sorry about that. It was so awkward, Mia said after the encounter with Rachel. She showed up 5 minutes before you and refused to leave. Sophia laughed softly, brushing it off. It's okay. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Trying to shift the focus, Mia added, by the way, Campbell got her broker's license, and she and I are starting a real estate business here. I raised an eyebrow at Mia. Really? You didn't mention this before. She giggled. Yes, Dad. I'm planning to transition my business out of Ojai. Campbell and I see a big market opportunity here, and we've been brainstorming. I'm listening, I said, leaning in. I want us all together, Mia explained. Here's the idea, I want you to live with me in Ojai for 6 months of the year. I'll hire an office manager so Campbell and I can spend 3 months here running the business. Before I could respond, Mia and Campbell joined us again, sensing the tension still lingering. Please, Dad, don't let this get weird, Mia pleaded, glancing nervously between Campbell and me. I snapped out of my thoughts, realizing my surprise had come off poorly. Campbell, I'm sorry. My reaction wasn't about you, I said quickly. Turning to Mia, I added, you caught me off guard, that's all. You never told me you were gay, but that doesn't change a thing. Mia smiled shyly. It's my fault, she admitted. I should have prepared you. Campbell nodded, seeming to relax a little. I'm her first girlfriend, so I didn't think it needed much explaining. I turned to Mia, meeting her eyes. Did you think I'd love you any less? I asked. You've always had my heart, and nothing will ever change that. Her face brightened, the tension melting away. Thanks, Dad, she whispered. Now, go sit by your girlfriend, I said with a smile. Mia sat beside Campbell, looking apologetic. Sorry, Daddy, Mia started, but I cut her off. It's over, kiddo. We won't talk about it again. Now tell me, how did you two meet? Mia smiled warmly as she began to explain. Campbell was a pitcher on the Florida State team. We met at a tournament. Love at first sight. I teased. Campbell laughed. It was for me. But she had a boyfriend at the time, so we stayed friends, until I moved here for a job. What do you do, Campbell? I asked, genuinely curious. I'm a financial advisor, she replied. It's a job I love, and it's what brought me closer to Mia. I nodded, seeing how comfortable the two were together. Later, while catching up with Emma, I asked, how well do you know Campbell? Pretty well, Emma said with a shrug. Mia told me a lot about her back in college. But I'll be honest, Campbell wasn't always great. What do you mean? I asked, sensing there was more to the story. She had a steady girlfriend once, Emma explained. But Campbell cheated on her. Mia wasn't happy about it, so they didn't hang out for a while. Wow, I didn't know that, I said, surprised. She's an adult now, Dad, Emma replied. Let her live her life. People grow up. I get that, I said thoughtfully. But you know how I feel about trust. It's a little hard to let things go after what your mom did. Mia, overhearing, frowned, her expression hardening. Yeah, she said quietly, the memory clearly still fresh. I didn't press further. Some wounds take longer to heal, but I reminded myself that Mia was living her life, and she deserved the same faith I'd always shown her. I know I'm the one who told you, Mia said angrily, her voice trembling. And now you think Campbell's the same? That pisses me off. Without waiting for a reply, she stormed out, ignoring my calls and texts for the rest of the day. Sophia wasn't happy either when she came home that evening. She wasted no time getting to the point. What did you say to Mia? She demanded. Did she tell you? I asked cautiously. Yes, Sophia replied sharply. She came to the office crying. What did you say to her? Because I'm worried about her. I said defensively, my frustration rising. Why couldn't she understand my perspective? Why can't you? Sophia's frustration was evident. You escalated things to this point. Do you even see how hurt she is? Her words stung, but I couldn't back down. I just want to protect her, I muttered. The tension hung thick in the air, and Sophia left the room, shaking her head. I spent the rest of the day sulking, replaying Mia's wounded expression over and over in my mind. That night, I barely slept, the guilt gnawing at me. The next morning, I stumbled through my routine in a mental haze, managing nothing more than a bowl of cereal. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood Campbell, the last person I wanted to see at that moment. I sighed and stepped aside, letting her in without a word. Campbell made her way to the kitchen as I awkwardly prepared a pot of coffee. I handed her a cup, and she took a sip, nodding approvingly. This is amazing, she said, setting the cup down and resting her face in her hands. Her dark eyes locked onto mine. Dax, you're crazy. I chuckled dryly. Probably. What makes you say that this time? Mia's devastated, she said plainly. And honestly, so am I. She doesn't understand you, but I do. I frowned, leaning against the counter. You do. Enlighten me. Campbell sighed deeply. I understand. Your wife, Mia's mom, cheated on you. Mia told you that? I asked, my stomach tightening. She did, Campbell admitted, her voice calm but firm. And I get why you're protective. But you're projecting that fear onto Mia's choices, and it's hurting her. I stayed silent, feeling the weight of her words. After a pause, Campbell continued. When I was younger, in college, I was surrounded by teammates who cheated. Out of the 20 of us, at least 10 were unfaithful at one point or another. I raised an eyebrow. That's quite a number. It is, she agreed, her tone reflective. Now imagine being young and surrounded by that environment. It affects how you see relationships. But not everyone succumbs to it. I was a sophomore when I started dating another girl. We were together for a year. I didn't cheat on her, and as far as I know, she didn't cheat on me. What happened? I asked, genuinely curious. Campbell paused, choosing her words carefully. I was invited to an elite skills camp run by 2 legendary players I idolized. It was a huge opportunity, and I didn't want to pass it up. But that camp, it was toxic. The people I looked up to were unfaithful, manipulative, and set a bad example. I started to question everything, myself included. Her voice wavered slightly, and she grabbed some tissues from the counter. I realized later I wasn't causing the toxicity, I was just trying to navigate through it. And Mia? She's not me. She's her own person, making her own choices. But she's navigating life, just like I did. Her words hit hard, the truth piercing through my defensiveness. I handed her another tissue, realizing I had let my fears cloud my judgment. I want what's best for her, I said quietly. So do I, Campbell replied, meeting my eyes. Let her figure it out, Dax. She's strong. And so are you. I walked around the counter, handing the tissues to Campbell, and gently pulled her to her feet before wrapping her in a hug. At first, she was stiff and resistant, but I held her close and spoke softly. Campbell, I'm so sorry. You don't need to say anything more, I understand, okay? I know how hard this was for you, and I made it worse. Please forgive me. Slowly, she began to relax, melting into my arms as her body trembled with sobs. I whispered reassurances, promising to do better. As her tears subsided, the front door opened, and Mia walked in, her sharp eyes darting between us. Campbell, she said, her voice edged with concern, what did you say to him? Nothing bad, Mia, Campbell said with a soft smile. I just came to fix things. He's an overprotective dad, and now I understand why. Mia turned to me, her expression softening. Dad, what did you say to Campbell? I met her eyes, guilt and love mingling in my voice. I'm sorry for how I acted, I said earnestly. I understand why you love her and how much she loves you. Will you forgive me? Without hesitation, Mia threw her arms around me, squeezing tightly. I love you, Daddy, and I always will, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. It's easy to forgive you. But I need to apologize too, I thought you were just being stubborn. Campbell laughed softly, wiping her eyes. He's stubborn, all right. But he means well. Later that day, I rented a car and made a stop at a flower shop, buying every rose they had in stock. Sophia wasn't home when I arrived, so I let myself in and began filling the house with roses. I arranged them in every corner, covering the space with the sweet scent of forgiveness. Finally, I knelt in the hallway, waiting. When Sophia returned, she froze in the doorway, her eyes wide with surprise. Tears welled up as she took in the scene. What is all this? She asked, her voice trembling. I looked up at her from my spot on the floor, my voice steady but filled with emotion. I've pulled my head out of my stubbornness. I'm so sorry, Peach. Please forgive me. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she crossed the entryway in a rush, falling into my arms. She hugged me tightly, pressing her cheek against the top of my head. Her curls fell around me like a soft veil, and her voice was a whisper. I hate being mad at you, she said, her words laced with relief. I'm sorry too. In that moment, wrapped in her embrace, I knew we'd found our way back to each other.